Hey guys, it's Kevin again. This is my review for Penny Dreadful, Season 1, Episode 5, Closer Than Sisters. And wow, guys, this episode was by far the best episode of the season. It was really amazing. I really love the backstory that we got between Vanessa and Mina. I didn't think we were actually going to find out the truth about that till, the season finale, but we pretty much now know everything we need to know about this plot. And I thought that was really cool because last week's episode, focused more on Dorian, Gray, and Ethan, and this episode focused a lot more on Vanessa and Mina. In fact, that was the whole episode. It was one big flashback, and there was nothing really of the present, except all we know is that Vanessa's writing her letters. That's really all we really know, and that's really all we need to know about this episode, because we don't need to know anything else because we find out everything else. But now we pretty much know everything we need to know. We know why, we know how Malcolm was involved. We know why Mina wants revenge on Vanessa. We know how Mina is connected to Vanessa, and it was a very interesting story. So we see Vanessa, she's writing a letter to Mina, and you can see that she does this a lot. She writes these letters a lot to her. It's definitely very common for her to do this, and you can definitely see that she does this a lot, as I said. So as she's writing her this letter, though, we see this flashback, and it shows her running with Mina on a beach. And they used to live next to each other. And Vanessa was actually very good friends with both of Malcolm's kids. We also found out that Malcolm had a son, as we know, named Peter. And, Peter, very important character in this whole flashback thing. But her and Mina were basically BFFs. They did everything together. And I like seeing that they were actually really good friends. And it makes sense why it's called Closer Than Sisters, because they were basically sisters. They hung out all the time, and they just had a lot of fun together. But unfortunately, there was a particularly bad night that something happened that Vanessa is recounting, and that's what she's telling about. So one night, Vanessa goes into the maze to look for Mina and Peter, and instead, she finds her mother having sex with Mina's father. And now this makes sense, because that's what makes so much sense, because if you remember in the episode 2, the seance, Vanessa was saying something about this, and we thought she was, possessed by Mina. It turns out that's not what it was. It's that Vanessa apparently might have some sort of demon inside of her. But she never told Mina anything. She never told her. But that night is when she started, she started being a little bit more mischievous. So, this is very interesting, because from here, we start to think of Vanessa a little bit differently than we have, because up to this point, we thought Vanessa was sort of like this girl who, sort of more like this girl who, yes, she does have problems, but I didn't think of her as, a crazy demon. I just thought of, let me turn on light in here. That's better. I sort of thought of her as just this girl who, was being haunted by this possessed demon, but that's not what it was at all. It was that she actually had something inside of her, so that's really cool, actually. I like they fooled us with that. As they grow up, Mina finds a found a man before Vanessa, envied Mina, and this only left Vanessa with Peter, which she didn't necessarily want, because she just didn't like Peter. She didn't really want Peter, and she was jealous of Mina. Mina got everything that she wanted. She was prettier than her. She, found a man before her, and this really kind of pissed Vanessa off. Vanessa wished that she could have had more than this. She wanted more than this relationship. She definitely wanted a bigger relationship than this, and she vowed to have just a better relationship overall. So that's what Vanessa really cared about here, and I thought that was definitely very, very interesting with this. So Mina started thinking about going to Indiana with her husband, and Vanessa, of course, didn't want her to, because she'd be losing her best friend if that happened. So think about it. If you are so close with someone, you've been tight with them for all your life, and then you find out that they're leaving, possibly, it wouldn't be good. So Vanessa does not want her to go. So one day, in a walk with Peter in the maze, Vanessa actually starts to kiss Peter. Basically, she does this to, because she doesn't know where else to turn. Mina's leaving with her boyfriend, with her husband. Vanessa still has nobody. She's still possessed, and not knowing where to turn, she ends up kissing Peter. But he, of course, did not want to. He gets flustered, and he runs away. So that night she tried to pray, but her prayers weren't answered by God, but rather a demon's voice, which is actually really cool. This really starts to show a different side of Vanessa, which I thought was definitely really cool in this episode. So then on the eve of Mina's wedding, we then see Vanessa, who lured her fiance to the taxidermy room with all of the stuffed animals, and then they have sex, like really, really angry, violent sex. Because, this is sort of like her revenge, I think, sort of. And it's in a room filled with dead things, and that's when Mina walks in. Because Mina's kind of like, quiet down or whatever, they're being way too loud. And she's basically just doing this because she's pissed off at this point. She's pissed off at Mina. She really is. So that's why she's doing that. And Vanessa then, what happens next is that when Mina walks in, she sees it happen, but he keeps going, and Vanessa stares at Mina while she watches. So it's pretty big there. So what happens next is that day, Mina's fiance leaves, and the wedding is now canceled. The wedding's now canceled, and Vanessa goes to see Mina, but then she finds Malcolm instead. And he doesn't allow her back into her home. And before she gets back to her own home, Vanessa then faints and falls under a random illness, and her mother gets very desperate, so she thinks to send her to an asylum, because she basically just thinks, oh, my daughter's going crazy. We know as an audience it's much more than that. It's really a really good example of dramatic irony with that scene, because we know it's a lot more than that. We know that Vanessa is possessed by some creature that's making her go insane, and that's why she's acting so freaky. However, to them, they think it's just, oh, she's just, like, going crazy, basically, just because she was born crazy. That's what her mother thinks. That's not what's going on, actually, at all. Because the doctor at the asylum believes he can treat Vanessa. He really wants to try to treat her. However, in a private meeting with the doctor, Vanessa actually almost kills the doctor. And in the next couple of scenes, they attempt to treat her. But of course, it's not working. It's just, her condition's getting worse and worse as this episode goes on. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And her treatments include, and the treatments are actually really weird. I mean, there's some weird treatments out there. The treatments are an ice water bath, messed into the neck, being hosed down with a power hose, getting a short haircut, and, so yeah, she gets a short haircut, so now she's bald, which, she's not bald now, but she was bald then, so I thought that was kind of interesting, actually. So, we can see that clearly the treatments are not working at all. It's pretty obvious, you knew the treatments really were not going to work in the long run. I didn't think the treatments were going to work, and they did not work. So back at her home, Vanessa's mother gets a visit from Peter. Peter is off to Africa with his father and wanted to see Vanessa. Now, she's laying in bed, and he tells her that he's off to Africa. When she asks him to kiss her, and when she asks him to kiss her, he does, and she says that he's going to die in Africa. And lo and behold, guess what happens? He does die in Africa. So she just plotted his death, which is really creepy if you think about it. But somehow she plotted his death, and she knew he was going to die. I don't know how she did it. I don't know. I'm not going to predict right now, but somehow Vanessa plotted his death. I don't know how, but just, I don't know. And then we get to, like, the end of the episode. This is where it gets really awesome, because here's where we find out why me and Vanessa, like, why Mina wants her revenge. Because what happens next is that Malcolm visits Vanessa, and she knows that he's also possessed by the devil. Because Malcolm apparently is also possessed. So they kiss, and as the two spirits have clearly been together before, then at one, and as the two spirits have clearly been together before, then at one point, Vanessa is naked and humping the air, like, she's literally humping nothing. Like, it looks like she's having sex with someone, but she's not having sex with anybody. She's literally just humping the air while she's naked, and it's really creepy, honestly, because it's just like, what are you doing? It really is. In that scene, I was like, what is she doing? And this, like, her mother walks in, and probably dies, probably from her straight face, since Vanessa's eyes were completely white when she looked at her, and probably it's also because it's like, it's just like shock, probably. Her mother probably died of shock, and she was just so surprised that her daughter was doing that. She didn't expect to see her daughter doing that ever. She never expected to see her doing something like that. And what's really cool about that scene was, I just thought it was a really well done scene, the way they did that. I overall really enjoyed that. I thought that was very well done. So the day of her mother's funeral, this is when Vanessa sees Mina again. They haven't seen each other in a while, because Vanessa's been at this mental institution for all this time. She's been home with Malcolm. She hasn't really seen Mina in a while. And Mina says she's now married to Jonathan Harker, which is very important in the story, because Jonathan Harker is, of course, related to Dracula. So that's really important. Now, she also explains she knows about Vanessa's run-in with Peter, and she explains the Master has taught her a lot. And then, suddenly, without warning, Mina then gets sucked into the sky, and that is when Vanessa comes to Malcolm's house. Now, here's where we find out how this whole Mina thing started. So somehow Mina just got sucked up into the sky. I don't know how that happened. I don't know what's going to happen to her, but she just got sucked up into the sky. So I really don't know. I really don't know, and I'm not going to try to explain it to you guys. And that is when Vanessa comes to Malcolm's house, telling him Mina needs their help, which basically starts their relationship together. And Vanessa explains how, and basically that explains their relationship together. So that's basically the flashback that we got. And that's really, really important, because now we know why they need to help Mina, because Mina's not actually there. She's, like, sucked up into the air, but she's kind of, like, I think she might be, like, trapped. I think she's trapped in the mansion. I think that's what it is that because she lived in the mansion, like, she's trapped in there, and they have to save her, basically. So then this next part's very, very interesting, because Vanessa then explains how she's been hurt by her transgression the night before Mina's wedding. At the end of the letter, Vanessa explains she will not rest until Mina is safe, and when she's done, she puts away into a bin of countless other letters she's written to Mina. And she says, everybody cares about you, Mina, but I care about you the most. And then she tells Mina she loves her enough to kill her. That is huge. That is just huge. Wow. What an episode. That's all I can say. What an episode this was. This episode was amazing. By far the best episode of the show so far. I commend everyone on their acting. Everything was awesome. And I'll say this right now. Eva Green, I think is how you pronounce it. Eva Green. If she does not win an Emmy for this role, then I don't know what's wrong with her. Because this episode was really Emmy-worthy. Like, seriously. She's been doing some great acting, but this is by far her best acting in the show so far. And maybe, like, the best acting I've ever seen Eva Green do. She really was fantastic in this episode. I thought she gave a really good performance. Very, very strong performance. And it really makes us think differently of Vanessa now. Because all we know is that Vanessa is possessed now. And the thing is, she's a little bit of both people. She's this kind-hearted person who wants to help out Mina, but at the same time, she's this dark, evil, powerful spirit that wants to, like, kill Mina. So it's a pretty big thing, actually, to see what she's actually going to do. And it's really going to set up the next few episodes well. And you know what I like about this episode, guys? This episode was a time for us to see flashbacks. This is kind of like Resurrection. Only this time, it was the whole episode. And I like that the whole episode focused on only that, because the last episode didn't focus on that much. And I like that they did that, because the last episode didn't focus on that so much. Last few episodes hadn't been focusing on that storyline so much, and I like that this episode did focus on that storyline a lot, because it made it a lot more interesting, in my opinion. I overall really enjoyed this episode a lot. I thought it was by far the best episode of the season. I really, really loved it, as I said. Very, very strong episode. I have a couple questions now. Now that we know some things, there are a couple things that we still need to clear up. But pretty much we know their story. We know where their story is. We know what's going to happen there. And really, it's just a story of jealousy. Vanessa was so jealous of Mina that it got the best of her, and as a result, she became possessed. That's the real thing with this story, is that she was just so jealous of Mina. So jealous of her, and she became possessed because of that. And I thought that was actually very interesting. And it's going to be very interesting to see where this goes from there, because I thought it was a very interesting story, as I said. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next on this, in Penny Dreadful. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens next. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens next. But overall, you know, by far best episode of the season. Couple questions still I have. Is Vanessa still possessed? We pretty much know now that she is, and we know why she said those things in episode 2, because she actually did see that. She saw Mina's father and Vanessa's mother hooking up. She saw that, and she was happy with it. So that makes sense now. We know why, you know, Mina hates Vanessa. It's basically a revenge thing. Mina's gonna get her revenge on Vanessa now, so we'll have to see where that goes. Is Vanessa going to be able to save Mina, or will she end up killing her? I really don't know. We'll have to see. And also, as far as Malcolm goes, are they going to be able to... What's going to happen with that? Or is Vanessa going to get the better of her, and her enemy is going to get the best of her? Because it seems like Vanessa, there's like two sides of her. There's the good side, and then there's the bad side. And it seems like there's no like middle in between both of those sides. It's like both of them are just as bad. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. Next week, though, it looks like it's going to be, you know, we're going to get back to the regular storyline, of course, because there was no Victor, there was no Dorian, there was no Ethan in this episode. It was literally just Vanessa, Mina, Malcolm. And I really liked about this episode, because it focused a lot more on characters that I really like, and I'm loving this show more and more every episode, because it gets more and more interesting. And especially this episode, it got very, very interesting. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where the next episode goes. And I'm sorry this review was a little bit shorter, but that was because there wasn't too much to say about this episode, except it was just really, really crazy, and definitely, as I said, Eva Green definitely needs to get Emmy consideration. But that's it for my review. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in my next review, which will be my review for *Halt and Catch Fire*. So I will see you guys for that review. And, alright, bye.